Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Career Cafe and the Industry Insights podcast. This is where we bring you insights into how to make work better for you. Today, we're exploring skills and mindsets you need to develop on the way to the C-suite. And to help us do that is someone who knows all about it. I'm joined by the Chief Executive Officer of Fine Choice Foods, Jason Longden. Jason, welcome and thank you very much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
No problem, Jeremy. It's my pleasure, and really pleased to engage with you today on this topic. So really excited and looking forward to this.
Great. Well, I want people to learn a little bit more about your background as well. So before Fine Choice Foods, Jason, you were also the Chief Operating Officer of Silver Hills Bakery.
That's correct.
And before that, the COO of Garden Protein International. So you've been operating at the C-level for some time.
Yeah.
You're also the board chair of the Manufacturing Safety Alliance of BC.
I am that as well. You are correct.
Which you've been involved with for some time, have you not?
Yeah, I've been on the board for 6 years now, and I've been the vice chair for the last 2 years. And it's interesting. I was actually supposed to. It was actually my last term on the board. The last 2 years was my last term officially. But with the with the onset of COVID and how the world is changing, I offered my services to continue in a extraordinary fashion to continue to work with the alliance and help the board, especially with so many new board members coming on board.
Yeah.
So I offered to stick around for an extra year, and it just so happened that during that time, the chair of the board also transitioned back to the UK for an opportunity, and so I offered my services to step up to chair, and it's my pleasure to do that for the alliance. I've been passionate and very involved with them for many years. So yeah, that's kind of what's going on.
Great. Well, the involvement with an industry association, I mean, is this a volunteer role, or how did you find yourself in that position?
Yeah, they're a non-for-profit organization and supported by WorkSafe BC. So the Manufacturing Safety Alliance of BC was founded over 10 years ago now, and was really kind of put together as an advisory organization and training organization to help manufacturers understand the importance of employee safety, help them work through making improvements, and it's been an incredible organization that's grown tremendously over the years, and has really made a dramatic impact on the health and safety of British Columbians. It's been made tremendous reductions in injury rates and incidents, and made massive improvements with WorkSafe BC's support as well. So yeah, it's a great organization. It's a voluntary position. And the people that sit on the board, we're all passionate about safety. We're all passionate about improving the lives of British Columbians. So yeah, it's a pleasure to do that.
Yeah, no, that's great. Which is probably, I mean, let's start with that. I mean, when we're talking about skills on the way to the C-suite, operating on a board, working with the board, working with an association or something where you're giving back to industry, how does that fit into someone who's planning a career? How do they get involved with that? And the second part would be, what value have you gotten from that as a career move?
Right. Yeah. So first and foremost, I've sat on several boards over the years, and I get tremendous value from other board members, right? Like we're all learning from each other. We're all networking beyond our own industry as well. It's not just food manufacturing, but it's manufacturing in general. And so there's an incredible amount of value that you can personally gain from learning from other industries, learning from other industry professionals. But you've got to put into it as well, right? Like it's a two-way street. Anybody
Sure.
that's looking to participate in a board, this is not just a resume builder. It's not just so your resume looks cooler. It's really important that you operate and you contribute and drive value as being part of that board. And so I've always been, fairly selective around my decisions on which boards I partner with.
Right.
Always made sure that I have the time and I have the energy and I have the passion to create value on that board, because it's a waste of a seat on that board if you're not prepared to commit to it. And so yeah, for anybody that's kind of moving through their career and they're fortunate enough to get an opportunity to participate in a board, think about carefully what you can bring to the table, how you can contribute and create value for that organization, and also what are you looking to get in return for that. And many times, especially with not-for-profit or voluntary boards, there's no financial benefit to doing this. This is not about picking up a board stipend or anything. This is about development. It's about personal development. It's about building networks and building collaborative relationships with people within that sector. So it's been incredibly beneficial to me as I've progressed through my career to reach out and be part of these organizations.
Yeah. No, I really agree with you. I'm a part of an organization where there's 40 independently owned search firms. And if you don't care about what you're doing, it's just a resume builder. You because it's work. You're
Right.
giving back. It takes time. So you have to think through what it is that you're doing so that it's a mutually beneficial outcome for sure. So let's talk a bit more about your path to where you are now. So you had been operating as the COO of some pretty substantial organizations. A little bit further into your career, you spent what, like a decade with Maple Leaf Foods as well?
Yeah, I did.
UK in North America?
Yes, I did. I'll give you the literally 1 minute overview of where I started my journey, because I started my journey, and I'm going to take you all the way back to my childhood. My mother was always in the food industry, and she was a real blue collar, hardworking, tough and rough kind of food production worker. I mean, I remember as a child, how she would demonstrate to these big muscly men on how to actually do hard jobs, and she always had that mantra that if she could do it, that the expectation is that anybody could do it.
Yeah.
So my career started early on, when I was a child, and my mum being in the food industry, and that's what led me to start in the food industry. And I was really interested in the science of food. It wasn't just about how delicious it was or how nutritious it was. I wanted to know about why food did what it did and how its composition was made up. And so my early career was really in food science, quality assurance and product development. And I spent many years in the technical side of food, with several large organizations, building my experience and gaining the knowledge that I needed. And in the late 90s, I guess, I was fortunate enough to be given an opportunity with a consulting company out of the US, and it enabled me to travel, and it enabled me to see lots of different cultures and many different processes and manufacturing companies, and gave me the chance to help those companies get better in terms of their food science, food safety, QA, regulatory side. And it really opened up, my mind and really gave me a breadth of knowledge that I'd never had before. And I still kind of go back to that experience and say that was a bit of a pivot point for me in my career, is getting exposure to that kind of, breadth of experience was incredibly beneficial. It also gave me a bit of a taste to become more entrepreneurial, and there's a real value to that entrepreneurial spirit. And then when I decided that the time was right, I partnered with a company in the UK called New York Bagel Company, and it was the first bagel manufacturing company in the UK. So bagels didn't exist, and I was
That's great.
and I was fascinated by it all, just because, you know, late 90s, early 2000s, there was a real boom in the UK about Americana. You know, everybody wanted, you know, the biggest hamburger you could find. And bagels was one of those products where it was like, well, we don't really know what it is, but it's pretty cool, and it's Americana, and it's on trend. And so I partnered with some other guys, and we grew that business out, and that's what led me to Maple Leaf Foods. We sold the business to Maple Leaf Foods.
Oh, wow.
And it enabled me to then I then started a career with Maple Leaf Foods in the UK to start with, and I was the head of technical services for all the regulatory side and food science side. And in 2002, I was approached by the executive at Maple Leaf and said, "Would you like to move to Canada?" And my wife and I had always, dreamed and fantasized about moving to North America one day. And I think at that point it was more about, we want to move to Manhattan and get a downtown condo, or we want to move to LA and live on the beach. And it all seems like a bit of we're looking for the unicorn kind of ideology. And Canada was never really on my radar until I worked with Maple Leaf and visiting Toronto a number of times and just seeing how beautiful the country was and how fantastic the people was. It was really motivating. So I came to Calgary in 2003 and run the West Coast bakery business. In 2005, I went back to the UK for an assignment that I was asked to do by Maple Leaf as we were building out a brand new facility in the UK. So we went back for around about 9 months. Completely coincidentally, my son was born back in the UK, so that was kind of neat as well.
Interesting. Yeah.
And then at the end of 2005, we moved back to Canada. I spent another 3 years with Maple Leaf before getting an opportunity in private equity to move out to BC and run Pine Ridge Foods. 6 years with Pine Ridge, incredible experience, massive growth. And my first real experience of private equity, and I was the VP of operations for the organization. We sold that company 6 years later, and that moved me on to Garden Protein, where I took up the role of chief operating officer, and subsequently sold that company to Pinnacle Foods very shortly after I joined. Actually, it was only a few months. Stuck around with Pinnacle for a while, helping them integrate the business in. So what I'm doing is I'm just gaining more and more learnings, right? I'm just opening myself to more, to more different scenarios, different companies, different values, different cultures. And then joined Silver Hills in 2016. One of the finest BC companies out there for sure. Family owned, tremendous family values. Just a great story of local growth, entrepreneurial business.
Some good people there.
Some great people there. Incredible product, organic, non-GMO, non-glyphosate product. It was fantastic, and spent a number of years working with that organization, and it was an incredible experience. What brought me to Fine Choice was partnering back with the private equity company that I was part of when I was at Pine Ridge, and taking on that CEO role and really stepping into that chair where, guess what, Jason, this is where the buck stops, right? You're taking your leadership to a different level at that point. Everybody depends on you much more. Everybody's looking for that guidance much more. And I was delighted to take that opportunity on. So I've been at Fine Choice now for a little over 3 months, I guess. My first day at Fine Choice Foods was the day when COVID exploded. So it's been an interesting journey in the first few months, but incredibly delighted and proud of how the team's managed it, and the organization is doing great. So that gives you a bit of a color on my career and how I've progressed, and and what I've really looked for developmentally, right, is challenging yourself, stepping outside of your boundaries a little bit, not staying within your comfort zone all the time, right? It's you know, the number of times I've said to my wife, I'm not sure I can actually do this, but I'm going to give it a go. And
Yeah.
And being able to surround myself with incredibly talented people that have you know, that have been part of my journey. So yeah.
So there's so many things in that story of where we are now that I'm excited to get into. Man, I've talked to a number of people over the years who say, yeah, I want to be CFO one day, or I want to be CEO one day. What strikes me about your story, Jason, is, I mean, it started with this example that your mom gave you, and going into food science, and it's like it's in your blood. You've seen this business from every angle, from the ingredients to the science to mergers and acquisitions, buying and selling, leadership, every piece of the business. You've touched it and you've seen it. So at the beginning of that story, did you think at that point in time, hey, one day I want to be CEO? Or how did that become a conscious thought that I am CEO, I'm starting a business, or I'm now CEO at the role you're in now? Where did that become? What was it, a conscious objective, or did it happen sort of organically as your skills grew over time?
It's a great question, and I'm gonna start by answering, you know, what my mindset was when I was, you know, 16-year-old coming out of high school into the big wide world and not entirely sure what the future was going to hold for me. And
Yeah.
you know, I'm very proud to this day. You know, I was raised in a significantly underprivileged part of the UK, and very proud of my roots. And you know, there's not a lot of you know, there was never a lot of success seen, and there was a lot of challenges in the neighborhood, and it was a challenging neighborhood to grow up in. And I go back to my mum all the time, just because, you know, I saw her go out to work for 12, 14 hours a day and do what was necessary to give us what we needed, to try and, you know, set us up for success for the future. I didn't really think I was ever going to be CEO, right? You know, I was looking at people on the neighborhood and looking at people.
That wasn't the expectation of you when you were a kid,
Not
or
at all.
even early in your career.
No, I wanted to be, you know, the world's best soccer player. I mean, that was ultimately my goal, right? Like, I dreamed of being Pele, and clearly I was never talented enough to take that career path. Even though still just a few years ago, you know, before I finally hung my boots up, I still felt like I could go back and play in the Premier League, but that's just a dream of mine. I met my now wife when I was almost 20-year-old. And she was, I'd been through, at that point, I'd been through culinary school. I was kind of the start of my career. I was starting to go to university to study food science, as well as working, by the way. I never went to full-time university. I actually studied part-time as well as working. And I met my now wife, and she was incredibly driven academically. She was going through college at the time, and she was got aspirations to go to university to study psychology and criminal law, and she was very driven on that side. And I have to give a lot of the credit to my wife kind of pushing me. You know, I was probably punching above my weight at the time, and I clearly recognized that if I wanted to make this a long-term deal with my wife, that I needed to make something more of myself. And so she pushed me, and she pushed me in all the right directions. And I think really the kind of the moment at which it felt like, you know, one day, or when I started to get aspirations to be a CEO one day, was when I was part of the company in the UK, the bagel company in the UK, and it was entrepreneurial, and it was high growth, and it was agile, and it was everything that was exciting about being part of a startup company and being part of growing something cool. And at that point, I thought, wow,
Jason,
I can actually.
were you a founder of that company?
I wasn't a founder, but I was one of the senior executives of the company. So it was founded by two American guys, and
Okay.
myself and one other British guy joined them to get the company going.
Yeah.
And I think it was that point where I thought I can actually do something. Like I could make something of myself, right? It was those times where, I'd been to New York a couple times by then. We'd done a bit of traveling, and it was that point where we started talking about, we want to move to North America one day, and then before you know it, I'm putting out goals 10 years from now and saying, well, I want to be at this level by this age, and one day I want to be CEO. And I think at some point, Jeremy, my values are going to change. My aspirations are going to change as I'm not getting any younger. And I think, I'm going to go back the other way. At some point, I'm going to say, I don't want to be CEO anymore. I don't want that level of, responsibility and that
Right.
level of accountability as we come back down the other side of the career graph, right? Because
Mhm.
I feel like I'm at the point where, I want to think about, retirement in the not too distant future. So it's so it wasn't always an aspiration. I would say, by the time I was, mid to late 20s, I was starting to think maybe I can actually make something of myself. Maybe I'm not just going to be the same guy off the neighborhood that's going to the pub every Friday night, a soccer game every Saturday, and then repeat. So, yeah.
Right. So the other thing that strikes me about that is you've been in the same industry your entire career, or
Yeah.
are very closely related. You said you met your wife like before you were 20. So
Mhm.
there's been a lot of consistent. I mean, even though you've moved around the world,
Yeah.
there's been this sort of backbone of consistency as well. I mean, how important or how does that fit into career success, do you think? Because there's some people who've gone from one industry to another industry, and it's like a chess game of how you make these moves. Like, how do you look at that?
It's a great question, Jeremy, and I'm gonna answer it by a couple ways, and I'm gonna give you some learnings around why industry is important. But what I found through my career is that I've progressively opened my bandwidth or my skill set in the same industry, but in different functional areas. So starting in a regulatory science kind of quality assurance product development position gave me a lot of the inside of how you should make food, why you make it a certain way, right? It wasn't until I moved to Canada that I moved from the science function to an operations function. And the operations function was like taking a whole new job all over again. So,
Sure, yeah.
the number of years I'd spent in the food industry learning about the science side was great, but I didn't come into the operations role. Like I actually, moving from the UK to Canada, I actually took a step back in position in terms of seniority. So, you've got this career progression that's a graph going up. And when I moved to Canada, I came down because I knew I needed to learn operations from ground up, right? And I saw that there was so much
So
developmental opportunity
that
from
wasn't a move to Canada thing as it was a change of function thing for you?
it
That
was it was the move to Canada opened up an opportunity for me to move functional departments.
right, but from a seniority and career trajectory perspective, you said, okay, was you were kind of on this trajectory, and then you moved from the food science to the ops side, and you kind of did this little dip.
Yeah,
But that wasn't because of a change of location, it was a change of function. Because I know some people,
correct.
when they come to a new country, they have a very difficult time
Nope.
integrating into the
It,
market.
it was nothing to do with a change of country. It was everything to do with the fact that the executives at Maple Leaf said, we see something in this guy. He's done a phenomenal job on the science side. We'd love to get him in the operations side, but he's not ready for a director or VP role. He's probably ready for a plant manager role. And that's a much, you know, it's a lower position than where I was in the UK. And I thought about that a lot, Jeremy, because a lot of people do get hung up on titles and do get hung up on, I need to continually progress.
Sure. Yeah.
I still progressed, right? I took a dip on title and seniority level to take more development, so that when I'm ready to become a VP of operations or a chief operating officer, I've got a much wider breadth of knowledge of food manufacturing in total. And that was an important step for me. I could have continued on my science path, and one day I would have been a chief science officer or whatever. But I feel like I wouldn't have got to a CEO level without doing more functional variables than just one functional department, right?
Yeah.
And going into that operations role was pivotal. And getting the job with the private equity firm to move out to Vancouver was another development opportunity for me, because now there was sales and there was marketing and there was other things that I needed to learn. And so it was almost like a, you know, I was taking 2 steps back so that I could make 10 steps forward faster than I would have done without that process, right?
Did you feel like you knew that that was going to happen while you were doing it? Because if I put, you know, I think there's some people who will listen and go, I'm in that situation right now. Am I making the right move? Like, did you always have the confidence that what you were doing was the right thing? Or did it feel like a bit of a gamble? Like, hey, maybe I should just stay doing this. It feels a little more secure. Do you recall your mindset?
I do. And so not just the fact that there was a kind of almost a step backwards, but I was moving to the other side of the world.
Yeah, sure.
And, you know, moving away from family, moving outside of your comfort zone. I was moving to a country where I was here on a work permit, and should I not be successful and that work permit not be extended, I'd be back on a plane and back to the UK. You know, it was scary to think about at the time. But it was a risk that I thought was manageable. It was something that I thought the rewards were worth it. Did it give me some sleepless nights? Absolutely. But I always thought moving to Canada was the right decision. And I always thought taking a step back into a different functional area would give me the ability to be more attractive for future opportunities. So yeah, it was deliberate in many, many ways. Now it could have gone the other way. I could have got over here and I could have, you know, not performed on the operations side, and it could have been a challenge. What I go back to every time, though, Jeremy, and I, you know, we haven't touched on this yet, though, is I'm only as good as the people that I surround myself with. And when I arrived in Calgary, my first real port of call was to say, do we have the right people on the bus, sat in the right seats, that's going to make this company successful? And it doesn't matter whether you're a scientist or an engineer or an operations supply chain professional. Leadership is the same no matter what you do, and people will be the same no matter what you do. And so I was very comfortable coming into this role thinking, you know, I don't know everything about operations, but I'm going to find people that do, and I'm going to make sure I surround myself with people that are going to be successful with me. And that's key. Nobody can do it by themselves. If anybody thinks they know everything, and anybody thinks that they can go in there and be a savior, they are wildly mistaken. It is all about team, and it is all about bringing the right talent to the table.
So if that's such an important thing, I agree with you. This is exciting for me. So if that's such an important thing, someone who's listening to this goes, okay, so it's about surrounding yourself with the right people. How have you gone about surrounding yourself with the right people? How did you develop the leadership skills, the ability to do that? Did you have a mentor? Was it innate? How did that come together for you? Because if that's what I aspire to do, how do I start to integrate some of those things into what I'm doing now to develop those skills, to give myself a chance for that to occur for me?
Yeah, it's a great question. Again, when I think about mentors, I'm going to go all the way back to my mum again. I was still calling my mum. In fact, I still call my mum today. hey, Mum, I've got this business challenge. What would you do? And I'm not suggesting my mum's always right, although she is in my eyes, but she was the one that helped me develop the early skills, right? She was the one, when I was 17, 18-year-old, and I really didn't feel like going to work today. She was the one throwing me out of bed and kicking me downstairs. Like, she was the one that inbred some of these values that I try and foster in other people today. So I go back to my mum as my original kind of inspiration and mentor. When I moved to Canada, and I'm going to make a statement that I think is really important for people to think about. You don't choose the company you work for, you choose the boss you work for. Because there are lots of great companies out there who have leaders that are challenged. And when I moved to Canada, I was fortunate enough to get a boss who was incredibly developmental for me. He taught me lots of things. He was very he didn't wrap me in cotton wool. He was very direct and very honest about what I was good at and what blind spots and what challenges I had, and he helped me develop through those challenges, right? And he always said to me that his career was so successful because he'd surrounded himself with the right talent and just provided them with the guidance that they needed. And that stuck with me in every role and every job that I've ever done. As a CEO, and it's a bit of a cliche, but people need to see you as the captain of the ship, right? You've got your hand on the wheel, and you're pushing the ship in the direction you want the ship to go. You need a lot of people driving those oars for that ship to go, to get momentum on that ship. And so, again, yes, I've had mentors and I've had business coaches, especially since I've moved into, more of that C-suite role. I do have executive coaches today that I reach out to because I don't know all the answers. Like, often I know few of the answers, right? You've got to stay humble. You've got to stay grounded. You've got to realize that you don't have the answer to everything, and it's great to reach out. It goes back again to the value of being a part of a board, right? Is that
right? Yeah.
You have a network of people that have different values, different cultures, different beliefs, different visions, and they're incredibly valuable to me personally, right? It's not abnormal for me to reach out to a fellow board member and say, I'm having this challenge. Have you been through it? You got any advice for me? What do you think? And you talk it through, and you rationalize on what should be done. So yeah, having mentors that can be meaningful for you is important, and I'm really proud to say that I've given back that way as well. Like I work with a lot of younger, up and coming people that are looking for that experience and that mentorship, and I really enjoy that. Like I'll go have coffee with them, and we'll talk through some things if they're having some challenges with, the number of times I get people calling me saying I'm having a real challenge with my boss right now. And I'm like, well, I can't really tell you much about, what your boss thinks, but I can help you try and navigate how to figure out what's going on.
Yeah. I wasn't planning on asking you this, but it just kind of popped into my mind. Management and leadership and the lack of skill in those areas. Everyone can talk about how they've had a bad boss or a difficult boss, and because people end up in maybe they don't end up, but people who are in management and leadership roles, there's a bell curve to everything. There's some that are really good. There's some average managers and some really bad managers.
Yep.
Why do you think it's so pervasive that many people have difficulty with their leadership? There's so many people that are in one of those roles, and they didn't have that mentor. They're in the role, then they have to, okay, now I have to figure it out. And unless you have a desire to really be able to reach in and help someone along, as opposed to just do your job as the manager or director or VP of whatever, why do you think that's such a pervasive thing in business, that there's people that have a challenge with their boss?
I'm not sure I have a definitive answer for that. But what I can tell you is, through my progression, what I found to be, really successful for me is when I go into a new role, or I go into a new company, or I'm going to be working for a new boss. I'm assessing, almost interviewing, whether that's a good fit for me as well. And I'm incredibly descriptive and direct with those people to say, this is how I like to work, and this is how I like to be supported. And if that doesn't work for you, I'm okay with that, but we probably shouldn't engage, right? Mm-hmm. And whether it's just by fortune or by consequence or whatever, it's always worked out. And for those people that get into roles and it doesn't work out, if you've got the self-confidence and the belief in yourself, you can still make a choice to deselect yourself from that boss or from that organization. Mm-hmm. And that's okay, right? Mm-hmm. I know it's not easy. I know it sounds easy. I know it's, people have financial commitments that they have to be aware of, and just general challenges. But if you don't feel like you can make the right headway, then you have to make some personal choices. Mm-hmm. And those personal choices are a couple of different directions. You can try and continue to work through those challenges and just have direct conversations, right? Or you can deselect, and there's only you can decide what the right solution is.
Yeah.
I don't think there is a real right and wrong, or I don't think there's a magic potion that I can tell you that works perfectly.
Yeah.
All I can say is that most bosses are looking for authentic, genuine people that want to do better, want to align with the company, and want to make a career for themselves. And it's not easy, and it gets it's also like generational differences need to be understood, right? Like,
for sure.
Different generations require different things. They're motivated by different parameters. Great leaders understand that. Great leaders are flexible enough to work through that and be accommodating, understanding about people's different needs. I read a great article yesterday on culture in BC and how it's so different to many other provinces and states in the US, just because of the lifestyle differences. And we're in BC, we're incredibly influenced by the tech industry, right? There's lots of tech industries, and tech industries tend to be incredibly progressive, right? From a people and culture point, and manufacturing industries tend to not be, for the most part, right? And we have as leaders, we have to be open and agile to making changes necessary to attract the right talent, right?
Yeah.
But so yeah, I don't think there's a silver bullet that fixes it. It's a challenge, but ultimately you have to make the right decision for you personally, right?
Yeah. Well, this is one of those things where, for me, I'm on a bit of a quest to try and get people to look at their work. So we talk about, industry insights, getting work to work better for you. So when you're looking at your work, do you look at your work as a job, or do you look at your work as a career? if you have a longer time perspective and you look at it from a career perspective, and you take some of the pieces that you've talked about here, where so much of it is based on the people that you have around you. You can't figure everything out. You don't have all the answers. But if you've got the ability to align yourself with the right people, that can be an incredibly powerful thing and career asset. Where I believe a lot of people go wrong is they don't put enough time into intentionally building that for them and looking at it as a career asset. A lot of people will only consider consider what that means when it's time to make a job change. Whereas I believe that you should be in the mindset where you're always looking at building your network. You should always be creating relationships and looking for opportunities to expand your network, because that has compounding interest or a compounding effect over the life of your career. So that instead of looking for a job, if you want to make a change or you need to make a change, you've already done all the work you need, because you have the relationships that you need in order to kind of author your way in an effect, as opposed to applying to job postings. Now, that's something that's going to be required at some point, but if you intentionally put the effort in and look long term, I think it can be a very powerful thing from a career management perspective.
Exactly. I always, the advice I give to, the folks that I'm, fortunate enough to mentor is build you are your own personal brand, right? Think about it that way, right? Be active in networking, right? Get yourself out there. Push yourself into uncomfortable situations to network with people, right?
Absolutely. You have to be willing to get uncomfortable a bit.
Right. Don't build your resume in terms of work profile. Build your resume in terms of who you've connected with, who have you influenced, right? I mean, if I thought for 1 minute that people would appreciate a resume written this way, there's your typical resume talks about your roles, where you've been, what you've accomplished. If I could write my resume by saying, these are the unbelievable and talented people that I've had the pleasure of working alongside. I think my resume would look way more cool if I could just put a list of people who I respect and who I would hire over and over and over again. And then the other piece of advice I give people, that's again back to your own personal brand, is become somebody who people want, right? Become somebody who, if you need to make a decision to, make a different selection in your career, you need to be in a position where you can pick up a phone and say, "Hey, I'm available."
Absolutely.
Because if you've got that kind of reputation, aside from the financial challenges that businesses go through, if there are people that call me and say, "Hey, Jason," and they're on my Rolodeck of high caliber talent, I may not even have a position available, but if they call me and say I'm available, I want them. And I'm going to figure it out.
Right.
I'm going to figure it out because I know they're going to generate value, and I know they're going to generate culture. So be that person. That's the brand you've got to build, right? And I think a lot of people miss that, right? A lot of people see it as, I'm driven by accomplishments, which is great. Everybody wants to see accomplishments.
So this is what we're talking. It's a mindset, right? It's how you think about this. We talk about skills and mindset to develop on the way to the C-suite. It's that. So this is full circle. It brings us all the way back to when we first started talking about your role with the within associations and not-for-profit organizations. If we go into those situations going, what's in it for me? Sure, there's an element of what, strategically does this make sense? But you've got to be prepared to give back. You've got to think long term. So if you're just thinking job, or you go to a networking event and only think, okay, what can I do? We need to be going to those, I think, with how can I serve? How can I give back? How can I help? How can I create something of value over the long term, you get way more out of that as opposed to just a transactional one-time thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the other thing I wanted to talk about is give people a little bit of an insight. So you navigated through your career, you've sat on boards, but you got a very active life outside of work as well. You're a father, you've got a family, you've got a son who's very active in sports. How do you manage all of that with all of this?
I have a terrific wife. First and foremost.
Maybe I should really just be interviewing your wife and your mom.
Yeah, exactly. No, I do, and I think it's important to have a supportive partner, right? And somebody that will, help you through this journey. I've moved across the world. I've moved province to province. Even prior to moving to Canada, we moved around the UK, and you've got to have, a special alignment with your partner for that to happen, right? There's got to be a tremendous amount of trust. There's got to be, a tremendous amount of alignment, and I think that's important, right? So yeah, my wife supports me with our son, and like you said, he's extremely active. She's almost as big a chauffeur as she is a mother. Driving him from rink to rink and all over the place. So having that supportive, and I'm very fortunate where my wife's been able to be a stay-at-home mom, and not everybody has that luxury. But you've got to be able to share in that responsibility as well, right? Like, it's not,
absolutely,
I don't you can't just, I have a very busy day every day at the office, and some days are more stressful than others, and some days are more challenging than others. They're all equally as rewarding, but some days you're more tired and some days you're more energized, and that's just normal human nature. And it's no different for my wife. She gets tired doing what she does, and so we have to find that balance so that I can be supportive of her and she can be supportive of me. But it really is about balance, and I really try to encourage that throughout the organization. I love to see people working hard. It's invigorating, but you've got to find time to recharge. You've got to find time to relax. You've got to find time to be active and do some of the things that you enjoy doing that's not so work related. I won't lie to people. As a senior executive in a company, you are 24/7 switched on, and you have to be. And that's a sacrifice you've got to be prepared to take, right? But there are times you've got to switch it off a little bit and make sure that there's balance there, right? So yeah, everybody's got multiple balls to juggle, and keeping those balls in the air is sometimes difficult, but you figure it out. And again, it's going to go full circle all the way back to having the right team, because if I need to be involved in everything every
personally
day,
and professionally, right?
It doesn't work, right? And having people you can trust to make the right decisions, and giving them the autonomy and the engagement to feel confident doing that is really important. So yeah.
Amazing. Well, we could talk for a lot longer. I really appreciate you taking the time on a busy afternoon to do this and impart some lessons for the folks that are going to listen to this. So I know there's going to be a lot of value, and it's sometimes it's those things where it might not be necessarily what you think, but it's the people element of it. As we kind of bring us to a close and summarize, it's the people element, the people that you surround yourself with. It's thinking long term. It's staying with it. It's consistency. The way that you treat people. These are all very, very important things to be able to have a lasting career, and one that really impacts and helps other people as well. So,
yeah, Jason, for sure. My closing words as such. I just want to remind people, I'm not the smartest guy. I never will be the smartest guy. I'm seldom the smartest guy in the room, and I'm okay with that. I'm not the most talented guy in the room, and I'm okay with that. And I don't, I can't be successful without other talented people and a level of mutual respect between each other. And so anybody that's building a career in leadership needs to, recognize that, needs to be humble. There will be tough times. There will be tough decisions. There will be really painful decisions you have to make, whether that's making a decision on an individual or a team, or there are times that are painful, but having, to go back to what you said, having the right people around you is absolutely critical. It's leadership 101. Whenever I've been fortunate enough to walk into a business, I look at the people. That's what I'm interested in. I want to see who's there. I want to see, what they bring to the table. I want to see whether they're the right fit from a values perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Never forget that every day is a learning, right? Every day you learn something new. It's a continuous, path of development, right? Like you're not going to know all the answers. But if you want to get the answers, you've got to be prepared to learn, and you've got to be prepared to develop yourself and develop people around you, right? I mean, I see so many organizations where, they hire let's say a junior accountant, and they stick them in the corner of a room and say, do your number crunching and give me the reports. It's more than that, right? It's developing them to know more than just accounts, right? Like expose them to other things, get them excited about the future, right? It's a human thing, right? Like business is all about business is all about human capital, and leaders can't forget that. They should never forget that.
There you go. Couldn't be said any better. So I hope those that have a real desire to advance in their career and succeed take that to heart. We'll close it there. Thank you so much, Jason.
My pleasure. Thanks for the invite, Jeremy. I appreciate it.
Thank you.